Here is something that should be impossible. In one valley on one continent, a single animal was removed. Not the largest animal, not the most numerous. One predator, and within a single human lifetime, the rivers of that valley changed their course. The water itself bent into new channels. Kill one animal, and a river moves. This is the story of how that is not a metaphor. This is the Lamar Valley in the northeast of Yellowstone. For 70 years, something was missing from it. The grass grew tall, and then it died. The young trees never grew at all. The riverbanks slumped and bled their soil into the current. No one understood why a valley could be so green and yet so quietly, deeply wrong. And then, in the winter of 1995, 14 animals were carried in over the snow in steel crates. And the valley began to come back to life from the top down. One pack, one winter, one valley remade. To understand what the wolves did, you must first understand the valley as it was without them. By the 1920s, the last wolf in Yellowstone had been shot. It was deliberate. A predator was thought to be a flaw in a beautiful place, a thing to be cleaned out. And for a while, the valley looked more beautiful than ever. The elk, with nothing left to hunt them, multiplied into the tens of thousands. An animal with no predator does not behave like a wild animal at all. The elk stopped moving. Why should they move? Nothing hunted them. So they stood all winter in the easiest and richest place in the valley, the soft ground along the rivers and the streams. And there, in herds that never left, they ate. They ate everything that tried to grow. The willows along the water were grazed to stubs. The young cottonwoods and aspens never reached above the height of a grazing mouth. An entire generation of trees, gone before it could begin. And without roots to hold them, the banks of the rivers began to fail. Consider what a single missing predator had done. No wolf had touched a riverbank. And yet, the riverbanks were dying. The beavers, who need willow to eat and willow to build with, had almost entirely vanished from the valley. Their dams had rotted and blown out. The ponds behind them had drained. The water that beavers once held in the land now simply ran straight through it. Faster every year, cutting the channel deeper and narrower and emptier. A valley can starve. And this one was starving from the top down. In the winter of 1995, the wolves came back. 14 of them, the first year, 17 more the next. They were brought from the cold forests of the north and held, at first, inside fenced pens deep in the snow, so they would not simply turn and run for home. And then, on a gray morning, the gates were open. For the first time in 70 years, a wolf set its paw on Lamar snow as a free animal. They did not stay together as one group. Wolves are not a mob. They are a family. A pack is built around a single breeding pair and around their pups, their yearlings, the grown offspring who have not yet left to found families of their own. By the deep cold of midwinter, one pair had claimed the heart of the Lamar. The valley now had a center again. It had a predator. A breeding female wolf in winter is the engine of everything that follows. In the spring, she will dig a den into a south-facing slope, deep enough that the killing cold cannot reach it. There she will give birth. Not to one, as the great eagles do, but to a litter, 4, 5, sometimes 6 pups, blind, deaf, smaller than a man's 2 hands, and entirely, utterly dependent on the hunting of the pack. For the first weeks, the mother does not leave them. She lives on what the pack brings her, regurgitated at the mouth of the den. But as the pups grow, the hunger of the family climbs steeply. 5 growing pups, 2 adults, a clutch of hungry yearlings. To feed them all, the pack must do the one thing the valley has not seen in 70 years. It must hunt the elk. And the elk have entirely forgotten how to be hunted. A wolf does not hunt like a cat. It does not stalk to within a single leap and explode. A wolf hunts with its legs and its patience and its family. It tests, it runs the herd. Not to catch it, but to read it. In the first 100 meters of a chase, a wolf pack is asking a single question of every animal in front of it. Which one of you is slow? Watch the herd, not the wolves. The healthy elk, the strong cows, and the prime bulls do something the wolves cannot answer. They run true, and they run together, and they put the weak ones at the center. But there is always one. An old cow with a stiffening leg, a calf from a poor summer, a bull worn thin by the autumn rut. The pack reads it in seconds. And then the testing stops and the hunting begins. The chase is long. This is the thing films rarely show. A wolf hunt is not a sprint, it is an attrition. Across hundreds of meters, sometimes a kilometer and more, the pack runs the chosen elk through the deep snow that holds her heavy body and lets their lighter ones skim across. They are not faster than she is. They are simply able to keep going after she cannot. The end is not graceful, and it is not cruel. It is simply what it is. The lead wolves take her at the haunch and the throat, and the pack's weight brings her down into the snow. For the elk, It is over in a few violent minutes. For the wolves, it is everything. It is the pups in the den, fed for another week. It is the whole family carried through the killing winter. And here's where the story begins to grow far larger than a single dead elk. Because the wolves did not only kill elk, they taught the living elk to be afraid. For 70 years, the herds had stood fearless in the soft open ground along the rivers. Now, for the first time in living memory, those open riverbanks became the most dangerous ground in the valley. The scientists who watched this happen gave it a name. They called it the landscape of fear. The wolves could not be everywhere, but the memory of the wolves could. And the elk, now hunted, began to avoid the places where they could be trapped against the water, where the willows blocked their sightlines, where a pack could come out of the trees with no warning. They stopped lingering on the riverbanks. They kept moving. And the moment they stopped standing on the riverbanks began to change. The willows no longer grazed to stubs the instant they sprouted, did something they had not done in 70 years. They grew, not by a little. In a few short seasons, willows that had been ankle high stood as tall as a person. And then taller still, 2 meters, 3 more. The aspens climbed past the reach of a grazing mouth and became young trees. The cottonwoods returned to the floodplain. A forest that had been eaten before it could be born was suddenly everywhere, being born. And with the willow came the architect, the beaver. A beaver cannot live without willow. It is food and it is building material, and it is the whole of a beaver's world. For decades, with the willow grazed away, the valley had held almost no beavers at all. Now, as the willow thickets rose along mile after mile of stream, the beavers returned. And a beaver does not merely live in a valley. A beaver rebuilds it. Watch what the beaver does to the water itself. It fells the willow and the young aspen, and it carries them into the stream, and stick by stick it builds a wall. The water backs up behind the wall. A pond forms where a bare channel used to race, and the pond changes everything around it. It slows the water, it spreads the water, it lets the water sink into the ground instead of tearing through it. One animal, with its teeth in a pile of sticks, begins to hold an entire valley's water in place. Now we come to the impossible part, the part that sounds invented. The wolves changed the course of the rivers. Not by touching them, by a chain of consequence that ran all the way down from a predator's tooth to the physical shape of running water. Follow it once more, link by link, because every link is real. The wolves hunted the elk. The frightened elk left the riverbanks. The willows and the aspens, ungrazed, grew tall. Their roots reached down and gripped the soil of the banks. The banks, held by roots, stopped collapsing into the water. The beavers, fed by willow, built their dams, and their ponds slowed the current and trapped the silt. And a river whose banks no longer crumble, whose water no longer races. A river like that stops cutting wide and shallow and straight. It narrows, it deepens. It begins once again to meander. This is what the scientists documented, and it is what stunned them. In the years after the wolves returned, the rivers of the Lamar physically changed their geometry. Channels that had been wide and braided and shifting drew themselves into narrower, more stable, more sinuous courses. The banks firmed, the pools deepened. New channels formed where the held water spread into the recovering ground. The shape of the water in this valley was redrawn, and the first cause of that redrawing was a predator. A single missing animal had bent the river straight. Its return bent them back, and it did not stop at the water. The new willows fed the songbirds, and the songbirds returned. The beaver ponds bred the fish, and the frogs, and the otters and the herons came back to hunt them. The carcasses the wolves left on the snow fed the ravens, the eagles, the foxes, and the bears just out of their dens, hungrier than anything else in the valley. Even the bears grew fatter, because the recovering berry shrubs, no longer stripped by overgrazing, bore fruit, again, one predator, and life came flooding back through every level beneath it. It would be easy to end the story there as a perfect machine. Pull one lever, the wolf, and the whole valley clicks back into place. The truth is richer than that, and stranger, and in its way more wonderful. The wolves did not do it alone. The return of the rivers was helped by changing climate, by fewer browsing animals overall, by the slow luck of wet years and the labor of the beavers and the grip of 10,000 willow roots. Nature is never a single lever, it is a web. But the wolf was the strand that, once cut, unravelled the whole of it, and once retied, began to weave it back together. Ecologists have a phrase for what a wolf is in a place like this. They call it a keystone. The single stone at the top of an arch that holds every other stone in place. Remove the keystone, and the arch does not lose one stone. It loses all of them. The wolf is the keystone of the Lamar. 20 pounds of pup grown into 100 pounds of hunter, and in its teeth, somehow, the shape of the rivers, the height of the trees, the song of the birds, the depth of the pools, an entire valley, balanced on the appetite of a single predator. The valley below them is not the valley of 70 years of silence. The willows stand tall along the water. The beaver ponds hold the spring melt in the land. Instead of letting it race away, the rivers run deep and dark and bending through their own forests. Once again. And all of it, every leaf, every pool, every new bend in the water traces back, through link after link after link, to the return of a single predator over the snow. We spent a long time believing that to protect a beautiful place, we should clean the danger out of it. That the predator was the flaw. The Lamar Valley taught us the opposite. The danger was not the flaw. The danger was the keystone. Without the thing that hunts, the hunted inherit the world, and they eat it bare. One pack, one winter, one predator, and below it in the gathering dark, a valley that came back to life from the top down. The willows, the beavers, the birds, the bears, and the rivers themselves. All of them rebent into shape by the long shadow of a hunting wolf. Kill one animal, and a river moves. We know this now, because we watched it happen.